It was a Saturday afternoon, the kind that every 10-year-old dreams of. I was at my grandmother's house, playing Call of Duty, lost in the world of virtual battles, as kids do. My brother was beside me, probably on his own game or watching me play, as siblings often do when there's nothing else to do. There's a strange comfort in those moments when the world outside feels far away, when you're too absorbed in the simple joys of childhood to think about anything else. For me, it was the kind of day that felt timeless, where all that mattered was the game and the laughter echoing from the living room. But then, everything changed. My dad walked in, his face tight with a seriousness I hadn't seen before. There was something about the way he moved, the energy in the air that shifted when he stepped into the room. He didn't say a word, not one. I was used to hearing his voice, even if it was just the occasional comment about how I was doing in the game or asking if we were hungry. But not today. His silence was unsettling, heavy in a way I couldn't understand at that age. He came to me, grabbed my wrist firmly, and without a word, he guided me out of the room. "Get your brother," he said quietly, his voice almost stern, though it lacked the anger or frustration I was used to hearing when he was upset. It was more like an order, but it wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The command in his eyes made sure I didn't ask questions. My brother followed without hesitation, probably thinking it was some kind of family outing or errand we were going on. It wasn't until we were in the car, no words spoken between any of us, that I began to feel the weight of whatever was happening. There was no radio playing, no idle chatter, just the hum of the engine and the tense atmosphere that seemed to wrap itself around us like a thick fog. I didn't know where we were going, or why we were going. I could feel my heart start to race as I looked at my dad. His face was set, determined, but distant. I wasn't sure why, but I knew something was terribly wrong. The drive felt like it lasted an eternity, though I'm sure it was only a few minutes. Time had a funny way of bending when everything around me seemed so uncertain. I tried to make sense of it, but no one said a word. It was like we were all in our own worlds, silently navigating a strange new reality. I kept glancing over at my brother, but he was just as confused as I was. He wasn't asking any questions, and neither was I. There was no need to. The silence was thick with tension, and even as a 10-year-old, I could feel it in the air. It was oppressive, like something was on the verge of happening, and we were all just waiting for it. My dad's grip on the steering wheel was tight, his knuckles white. I noticed how his jaw was clenched, his face hardening with every turn he made. He wasn't angry, at least not in the way I had seen him before, but something about the way he was driving suggested urgency, as if we were on some kind of mission. His eyes were fixed ahead, unmoving, not even a glance toward us. I couldn't read him anymore, couldn't understand what he was thinking. It was like he had become a stranger in that moment, consumed by whatever mission was driving him forward. The hum of the car's engine, the quiet whooshing of the wind outside, and the faint noise of tires on the road filled the void. It was surreal. No words, no sounds, only the beating of my heart in my chest, as it quickened with every passing minute. I could feel the anxiety rising in my throat, a tightness I couldn't shake. I didn't know where we were going, or what was going to happen when we got there, but I could sense that something was terribly wrong. My thoughts raced, but I couldn't catch up with them. There was no logical explanation for why we were being driven to some unknown place without a word spoken. The further we went, the more my sense of fear grew. It wasn't just the unfamiliarity of the situation, but the weight of my dad's silence, the sense of purpose in his every movement, that unsettled me. Whatever was about to happen, I knew I couldn't avoid it. I wasn't sure if I even wanted to know the truth anymore. The closer we got, the more I realized that life as I knew it was about to change forever. When we finally arrived, the car came to a halt in front of a house I didn't recognize. The tension in the air was so thick, I could almost feel it pressing in on me. My dad didn't pull into a driveway, or stop by a familiar entrance. He parked on the street. We got out without a word. At this point my heart was pounding, but I still didn't know what was going on. I glanced at my brother, his eyes wide, mirroring the confusion I felt. He didn't say anything either, just silently followed my dad. As we approached the house, my dad walked up to the door, his pace steady and deliberate. I could feel the seriousness in every step he took, the way his body was taut with some unspoken resolve. As he knocked on the door, I watched his hand, gripping the doorframe like he was waiting for something. When no one answered, his knocking grew more insistent, almost frantic. Each knock was louder, more forceful than the last. I thought he was about to break down the door with his fists. And then, without warning, he started kicking the door. Hard. My ears rang with the sound of each thud. I could hear the wood splintering, the force of his kicks shaking the frame. I was frozen, standing there on the porch, not knowing what to do or say. I wanted to ask him what was going on, to demand an explanation, but the words wouldn't come. The sight of my dad, so consumed by whatever was happening, was terrifying. I had never seen him like this. I didn't know this side of him existed, the side of him that was this angry, this determined, this reckless. At one point, a woman from a few houses down popped her head out of the door. She looked confused, concerned, asking if everything was okay. My dad paused for a split second, as if noticing her for the first time. Then, in the calmest voice I had ever heard, he simply said, "Everything's fine." It didn't match the chaos of the moment at all. The way he spoke was so calm, so composed, that it threw me off even more. I didn't understand how he could be so calm, while his actions were so aggressive, so out of control. But then, with one final kick, the door gave way. It crashed open, and without hesitation, my dad stepped inside, as if this was exactly what he had planned all along. I followed, my legs shaking as I stepped into the house, but I didn't know what to expect next. All I could feel was the strange mix of dread and anticipation. Whatever was waiting for us inside, I knew it wasn't going to be good. As soon as the door crashed open, the world inside seemed to freeze. There was no shouting, no immediate confrontation, just the heavy silence that followed my father's entrance. I stood frozen at the threshold, unsure of whether I should follow or turn around and run. The room we stepped into was dimly lit, the kind of house that felt cold and unfamiliar. It didn't feel like a place where anything good could happen. The weight of the silence grew unbearable, and I could hear my breath echoing in the empty space, my heart racing in my chest. My dad moved quickly, almost mechanically, as if he knew exactly where he was going. He didn't look back at us, didn't pause to check if my brother or I were behind him. His focus was entirely on one thing, finding the truth. I followed him through the hallway, my mind spinning, trying to catch up with what was happening. Every step felt heavier than the last. I had no idea what I was about to see, but I knew that whatever it was, it would change everything. Without a word, we moved through the house, and I found myself walking upstairs. It wasn't a conscious decision. I didn't know why I was heading in that direction, only that my feet were carrying me up, step by step, as if some invisible force was guiding me. It was like I was in a trance, unable to stop or think about what I was doing. My dad had already disappeared into one of the rooms, and I continued to follow without thinking, my body moving automatically. When I reached the top of the stairs, the first thing I saw was her, my mother, sitting on a toilet in a bathroom, her face buried in her hands. She was sobbing uncontrollably, her whole body shaking with the force of her tears. It was the kind of cry I had never seen before, raw and gut-wrenching. She wasn't the strong, composed woman I had always known. In that moment, she was completely broken. I stood there frozen in place, not knowing what to do. The sight of my mother like that, so vulnerable, so lost, was nothing I had ever imagined. I had never seen her cry like that before, and I could barely comprehend what I was witnessing. This was the woman I had looked up to, the person who had always been my rock, now reduced to a wreck in front of me. My heart broke for her, but it also twisted with confusion and anger. How could this be happening? Why was she here? And why was I seeing this? Before I could fully process what was happening, my dad appeared in the doorway, his hand reaching out to pull me away. Without a word, he led me and my brother back outside. The sound of my mother's sobs followed us, a haunting reminder of what we had just witnessed. I couldn't even look at her as we left. I didn't understand. I didn't know how to feel. My world had just shattered in a way I couldn't even begin to explain. The moment my dad's hand grasped mine, pulling me away from the bathroom, everything seemed to blur. It was like I was in a haze, moving without thinking. My heart was pounding in my chest, my mind spinning with questions, confusion, and a deep, unsettling sense of disbelief. The sounds of my mother's sobs echoed in my ears as we walked out of the house, and I couldn't shake the image of her, broken and alone, sitting on that toilet. The image haunted me as I tried to make sense of what had just happened. My dad was strangely calm as he led us out the door. His movements were deliberate, controlled, but I could feel the tension in his grip, in the way he held onto my wrist. He didn't speak, not a single word, but his silence was deafening. It was as if he was trying to keep it together, trying to keep his emotions buried deep inside, even though everything inside of him must have been breaking. As we made our way back to the car, I couldn't help but steal a glance at the man standing at the doorway, the one who had been with my mother. For a brief moment, our eyes met, and I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. His face was a blur, but the look he gave me, full of guilt and regret, made me feel sick to my stomach. I wanted to scream, to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. My dad didn't stop, didn't acknowledge the man standing there, as if he didn't want to give him any more attention than he deserved. He didn't even glance at him. As we got into the car, the drive back was the same as before, silent. The kind of silence that fills every corner of the car, making everything feel suffocating. I tried to make sense of the overwhelming feelings inside of me, but nothing made sense. My mind kept replaying the image of my mother's breakdown, her tears, and the hurt on her face. The confusion was unbearable. I didn't understand why any of this was happening, why I had to witness it. It felt like my world had been upended in a matter of minutes. I glanced at my brother, but he was just as silent as I was. We didn't speak about what we had seen, not then, not for a long time. What could we even say? There were no words for the kind of pain that we had just been forced to witness. There was nothing to explain why we had been dragged into a situation so grown up, so out of our control. I wanted to ask my dad why, to ask him what had just happened, but I knew better than to break the silence. I felt like if I spoke, it would only make the weight of the moment even heavier. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I didn't see my mother for weeks, and I couldn't escape the images of her, the betrayal, the chaos. It was the kind of memory that doesn't fade. It lingers in the corners of your mind, waiting to be remembered when you least expect it. At the time, I didn't have the words to describe what I was feeling. It was as if I had been dropped into an adult world, one where betrayal, pain and confusion ruled the day. As a 10-year-old, I didn't fully understand what had happened, but the weight of it pressed down on me. I had always thought of my parents as this immovable foundation, something constant in my world, but in that moment, everything shifted. The image of my mother's brokenness haunted me, her tears, the rawness of her emotion. I had never seen her like that before, and I didn't know how to process it. I wanted to ask my dad why. Why had he brought us there? What was the point of showing us something so painful? Why couldn't he have just dealt with it on his own, without dragging us into it? But those questions were too complicated for me to voice. I didn't have the emotional maturity to understand why my father chose to take us there, to show us what he had seen. All I knew was that I couldn't stop thinking about the scene we had walked into, the unexpected shock of it all. My brother and I didn't talk about it. We didn't talk to anyone about it. It was like this unspoken rule between us. How could we talk about something so impossible to explain? How could we talk about something that didn't make sense to anyone, least of all to us? The silence between us felt heavier than the weight of the day itself. We were both trying to process something that no child should ever have to witness. We were trying to come to terms with the fact that our mother had betrayed our father, and that we had been right there in the middle of it. As the days passed, I tried to bury the memory. I told myself I would never talk about it, that it was just a weird, terrible moment that would fade. But it didn't. It lingered, waiting for me to look back and feel the sting again. I remember feeling this strange mix of anger and sadness. Anger at my mother, for betraying my father, for breaking something so sacred in our family, but also anger at my father, for bringing me into the situation, for letting me witness his pain in such an intense, raw way. And yet, underneath all of it, there was a deep sense of confusion. I didn't know what I was supposed to feel. I didn't know who to be angry at or how to direct all the emotions I was feeling. The weeks that followed were silent too. I didn't see my mom for months after that. The space she left was like a void, a place where questions went unanswered, where explanations didn't come. I didn't know why she had left, why she hadn't spoken to me or my brother. I didn't understand any of it. and the silence made it worse. Every time I thought of her, I remembered the image of her broken, crying face. I couldn't escape it, no matter how hard I tried. The months that followed the incident felt like a strange, suffocating void. My mother was gone, physically and emotionally. She didn't reach out to me or my brother. I didn't see her for 2 or 3 months after that day. The absence was deafening. The house felt quieter without her, and the emptiness of her absence was felt in every room. I didn't know what to think. How could I? I was just a kid, trying to make sense of a situation that was completely out of my control. During those months, I was left with the aftermath of what I had witnessed. Every time I thought of her, all I could remember was that moment, her on the toilet, breaking down in front of me, her vulnerability laid bare in a way I could never have prepared for. It was like a memory that kept replaying in my mind, forcing me to relive it over and over. It was impossible to escape. But what made it worse was the fact that she was gone. She wasn't there to talk to me or comfort me, and there was no explanation for why she had pulled away. I felt abandoned, not just by her physical presence but emotionally, too. I didn't understand why she had left. I didn't understand why she hadn't tried to fix things or explain herself to me, and the silence from her only deepened the confusion. It was as if she had become a stranger, someone I couldn't reach out to, someone who had shut herself off from the world, including me. My father didn't talk about her. He didn't mention her name, and he never explained what had happened. I was left to guess, to piece together a broken puzzle of fragmented emotions. At the same time, I could feel the shift in my father. His demeanor changed too. He had become quieter, less present. His anger was replaced with something darker, something more distant. It was like he had retreated into himself, carrying a weight that was too heavy for me to understand. I couldn't blame him. How could I? But his silence, like my mother's absence, created a rift. It was as though we were all drifting apart, each of us dealing with the aftermath in our own isolated way. I began to carry the weight of that silence with me, like an invisible burden I couldn't shed. I wanted to reach out to my mother, to ask her what had happened, to beg her to come back and make everything okay again. But I couldn't. I didn't know how. I didn't know if she even wanted to talk to me after everything. The uncertainty gnawed at me, leaving me restless and confused. In the absence of my mother's presence, I became more aware of the cracks in our family, and I realized in a way that we might never be the same again. Looking back, I can see how deeply that day shaped me. At the time, it felt like I was living in a fog, confused and uncertain, trying to make sense of the chaos. But as the years went by, I began to understand how much that moment had impacted the way I viewed relationships, trust and family. I had witnessed my mother's betrayal, and my father's reaction, and even though I didn't fully understand it then, I now realize how those experiences formed my understanding of love and loyalty. For a long time, I carried around the weight of that day, trying to process emotions I wasn't equipped to handle. As a child, I didn't have the words to explain what I had seen, or the tools to work through the conflicting feelings inside me. There was anger, at my mother for what she did, at my father for dragging me into it, and at myself for not being able to stop it. But there was also confusion. How could someone I loved so much betray someone else I loved so deeply? How could two people I admired be so far apart? The questions haunted me, lingering in the back of my mind. As I got older, I began to understand that what happened wasn't my fault. I had been a child, and I had witnessed something that no child should ever have to see, but the trauma from it stayed with me. It affected my relationships, my view of trust, and my ability to open up to others. I became guarded, unwilling to let people in, scared that if I did, I would only be hurt. I was afraid of betrayal, afraid of loving someone who could hurt me the way my mother had hurt my father. But I also began to learn something important. Vulnerability doesn't always equal weakness. I started to realize that in order to grow emotionally, I had to confront what I had seen, accept the emotions that came with it, and begin to heal. I couldn't keep carrying the anger or the confusion forever. I had to forgive, not just my mother, but also myself. I had to let go of the bitterness that had held me back for so long. Over time, I learned that love isn't perfect. People make mistakes, families break, but they also have the power to heal, if there's enough honesty and effort. My parents never fully healed from that betrayal, but I did. I found the strength to trust again, to love again, and to understand that I could still be whole despite the cracks in my past. That day, as painful and confusing as it was, taught me valuable lessons about the complexity of human relationships. It taught me that I could weather storms, confront my fears, and emerge stronger on the other side. As time passed, I began to see that my life was not defined by that one moment. As much as it had shaped me, I realized it didn't have to control me forever. The months without my mother, the silence and the weight of betrayal had left deep scars, but I slowly started to realize that healing wasn't a destination, it was a journey. It wasn't about forgetting what had happened, but learning how to carry it with me, using it as a lesson rather than a burden. I didn't need to carry the anger anymore. I didn't need to let it taint the way I viewed relationships moving forward. It was hard though to let go of that hurt. I spent a long time questioning my ability to trust others, wondering if I was capable of giving someone the love I had once freely given. But I came to understand that trust wasn't something I could just give away blindly. It had to be earned, and it was okay to be cautious. It didn't mean I was broken or incapable of love. It just meant I had learned to value myself enough to set boundaries and protect my heart. When I finally reconnected with my mother, it wasn't easy. The months of silence had created a chasm between us that we both needed to bridge. I still felt a pang of anger, of betrayal, but I had grown to understand her humanity in a new way. I understood that, just like anyone else, she was capable of making mistakes. The pain of seeing her like that, vulnerable and broken, stayed with me, but it also taught me compassion. I had learned that forgiveness wasn't about absolving someone of their wrongdoings. It was about freeing myself from the weight of anger and pain. Forgiveness wasn't for her, it was for me. As I moved forward into adulthood, I carried with me the lessons from that day. The experience didn't make me cynical about love, but it did make me cautious. I learned to be discerning, to trust my instincts, and to never settle for anything less than respect and loyalty. My heart had been tested, and though it had been scarred, it was still capable of love, capable of trust. And so I moved forward. I embraced the future with a sense of hope that had once felt impossible. The road to healing was long, but I knew that I could face whatever came my way, because I had already survived one of the most painful lessons life had thrown at me. I had learned that I was stronger than I had ever realized, and that strength would carry me through whatever challenges lay ahead. As I stand here today, looking back at everything that happened, I can see how far I've come. The child who once sat frozen in confusion, watching her world crumble, has grown into someone who understands the complexities of love, trust and forgiveness. The day my father took me to confront my mother's betrayal will always be a part of me, a significant chapter in my life's story, but it doesn't define who I am today. I used to think that the pain from that day would follow me forever, that it would always be the shadow that loomed over my relationships, my ability to trust others, and my understanding of family. But over time, I've realized that the only thing truly holding me back was the belief that I couldn't move beyond it. Healing, I've learned, is not linear. There were days when I felt like I had made progress, and others when it felt like I was stuck in the same emotional place, rehashing the same feelings. But with each day, I found more peace. I found more strength in allowing myself to feel the hurt, to acknowledge it, but not to let it consume me. I learned that it was okay to still be affected by what happened, but that it didn't have to control me. Reconnecting with my mother, though difficult, was a step toward healing. I didn't expect her to apologize, and honestly, I didn't need that. What I needed was the understanding that we both carried the weight of that day, her for the choices she made, and me for the way it shaped my view of the world. We both had to come to terms with the fact that healing was something we had to do together, but also separately. Forgiveness didn't mean I forgot. It meant I had found a way to make peace with what happened, even if the scars remained. As I moved forward, I realized that I didn't need to carry the heavy burden of anger and betrayal anymore. It was exhausting, and I knew that letting go wasn't about excusing anyone's actions. It was about freeing myself from the chains of that pain. I've learned to trust again, to open my heart, and to build relationships with the understanding that people are flawed, and love is not always perfect, but that doesn't mean it's not worth having. The future is uncertain, but I approach it with a newfound sense of resilience. I know that whatever comes my way, I'll be able to handle it because I've already faced the unthinkable and come out stronger on the other side. The child who witnessed her parents' brokenness now stands tall, a person who understands that healing is a lifelong journey, and while the past will always be a part of me, it no longer holds me back. I am free.